There's some interesting geological formations. I suppose those are part of the coulees, but that's not really what I want because it's too specific. I want something more general. My most successful work of recent has been in the area of landscape or phenomena or a mixture of the two. So I thought it appropriate to begin thinking in terms of what is this particular landscape, what are its main characteristics and what are its special characteristics? Well, I noticed some pretty obvious things, that one gets to see a lot of sky here, and also that the weather changes quickly from hour to hour. I'm going to do a little stylization, of course. I mean, I'm not going to try for purely naturalistic work. But the overall effect will be quite real, in a sense, not surrealist, but in a sense more than real. Probably, undoubtedly, I'll heighten the colors. Some of the greens will be brighter than the actual fields. Some of those almost purple-colored areas and almost orange-colored areas. I'll just be leaving out the fence posts and telephone poles and things if there are any in the way, because I'm not trying for a lot of linear perspective or rusticness. I want this rolling landscape. You have sudden gusts of wind. You have very heavy cumulus clouds that change, disappear, reappear. You have lenticular clouds. They're sort of saucer-shaped clouds hovering over the distant mountains. They tend to be rather stationary. You can see rain in the distance, but it's bright sunlight here. So I began to take this in and try to formulate it as a particular kind of landscape. And I thought since that was a major characteristic of this area, that I would do a sort of compendium of the weather. terms of atmosphere, we're going to try and make it somewhat like it was today and mix that in with the way the weather went and some of the other days we went out. Rather a clear sky with a few isolated clouds, building up to what almost looks like bad weather. Somehow get that feeling that the wind is blowing the grass, and get the feeling that the wind is changing the clouds and it's having an effect on the earth part of the landscape as well. I think I'm putting it together in my mind. We took some color film that could be developed quickly. We weren't looking for any kind of accuracy. We shot around in a 360-degree angle. Needless to say, I don't use any one of these to copy from, but I have no hesitancy to copy from a photograph or to use a photograph as a point of departure for another type of work. The sketch was done after looking at some landscapes by other painters of the past, particularly Van Gogh. I picked Van Gogh as a source because in this last period at Auvers, he painted a landscape which is strangely similar to the landscape around here. The wind has a lot to do with that. The wind hits these fields and makes the grass move, and it's also flat. So I was looking at Van Gogh's work from his last period. I was looking at the photographs that my friend and I took. And then back in the studio, it was really a spontaneous gesture to do the sketch. The sketch is done in pastel. It was done very quickly, and I feel happily that it did capture some of those qualities that I was looking for. So that now I have these three things ongoing, and I'm ready to start actually working on the board. You know, when you're teaching art, you have to be aware that the younger students especially are very unnerved by the blank canvas, even if it's only 20 inches by 24 inches. There's a scary moment there when there's nothing on the canvas and you're supposed to place a work of art on it. Well, what we have here is a much more challenging situation, but then, of course, I'm not a first-year student, so I shouldn't feel terribly nervous about it. I don't feel that nervous, but this area that we're dealing with is 8 feet high and 16 feet long. So rather than speak of nervousness, I would certainly speak of it as a challenge. In this case, there's a second factor which is not always present in my work, and that is that this is a commissioned mural, mural commissioned for the University of Lethbridge, and it must fit in a certain space. So one must keep in mind not only what will go on the 8-foot by 16-foot area that we have here in the studio, but one must keep in mind also where this is going to be installed. The importance of this, as opposed to doing, say, work half this size, which would still be a large painting, is that this is going to be permanently installed in a stairwell that students will pass by over the years, you see, and it won't be taken down after a week and somebody else's work put up. It's more or less permanent. You know, consequently, you also have to think of the materials you're going to use and use materials that will last that long. So you see, a lot of the, if you could call it, if you want to call it nervousness, I don't mind. It's a bit like an athlete. You should be a little bit keyed up before you attack a thing like this. And but I do have my subject matter down, and I feel at home with the size now, and I'll be ready to start the first phase of the work. That is a very initial drawing anytime now. Now you can see that we have some drawing on the plywood, and this is the first time that we've touched the actual wood surface. The drawing, of course, is a guide, and I'll use it when I apply my tools to the work, but not precisely. In other words, the lines you see are not necessarily the lines into which I will gouge with a hand gouge or the router. As the work goes along, it gets further and further away from the photographs, gets further away from that which was suggested by looking at Van Gogh's work in this last period, and more of it starts to simply have a life of its own. But the initial drawing in with pastels is necessary and useful to get started. As a child, I always felt that to be an artist is probably the most desirable occupation one can have. And it was a summer after my first year in university. I took a holiday to Quebec City, and the desire to do something like art became very strong again, and I went and got a pad and some drawing pencils, and I started to do quite a complicated drawing of the corner of the Citadel. And this woman came up behind me and she said, "Oh, you're an artist?" And I said, No, I'm not an artist. I'm just drawing. I've never done a painting." And she said, "Well, why don't you do a painting?" And I said, "Oh, well, I would have to study drawing for several years before I could start to paint." And she said, "Nonsense." She said, "Just buy some paints and paint." So it's quite funny because I have no recollection of what she looked like, and the reason for that is that I don't think I turned around. I was doing my drawing, and the voice was talking to me from behind. And I'm not suggesting there's anything supernatural here, but when she was there, I'm sure I did turn around. As I say, I have no memory of what she looked like or what her age was or anything. You can see the bottom part here obviously suggests the land part with its plowed fields or grass, and then the upper purple or blue part, a guide for the way the clouds are going to go. The next logical phase would be to use the router. The two basic things that it does is it rips off the top layer of the plywood, giving me the surface I want to apply paint to. The second thing it does is it makes grooves into which I insert paint and then roll over with a printer's roller. But what she said seemed to make some sense, which is, I suppose, a way of saying that it reinforced me in what I wanted to do. So I went and I bought a box of paints and started to do a painting of that same scene. And I did 2 paintings that summer, taking the first painting took me 2 months. The second one only took me about a month. And I had to finish them off back at home, back in Montreal West. You see, because I was brought up in the English-speaking West End of Montreal. as soon as I was back in Montreal, I bought two books on art. One was a book on Cézanne, and one was a book on Picasso. I took off from there and started to paint quite seriously. I went to speak with the dean. He said, if you've found something that engages your interest to that degree, he said, why don't you go over to the Montreal Museum School of Fine Art and Design and study painting with Arthur Lismer, who is one of the group of 7. And he said, there are other teachers like Goodrich Roberts. So I did just that, and those were two of the happiest years of my life. The first 5 years of my work were figurative paintings. And then I did a kind of abstraction which had very much a landscape quality. A landscape quality not unlike this very work. When I look at this painting sometimes, I'm reminded of a particular period in the late 50s, early 60s, where I bought one of those saws that has a handle, and then you have 5 different saw blades that you can put onto it. I used those as one would use brushes, and that's how I got these sort of linear textures in these paintings. By the use of straight bits going down into the wood, making lines about 1/4 of an inch deep. I am, in fact, at that point, drawing with the rosin. I had the opportunity to move to London, Ontario, and teach at the University of Western Ontario. The style of my work at that point became more and more minimal until I was doing paintings 10 foot by 12 foot. Just with a single line sweeping through a color field. Now, these works were they received some attention, and they were included in reasonably important exhibitions. But somehow they weren't that satisfying, and I got tired of canvas, and I got tired of brushes, and I really felt that that period didn't come up to the earlier, let's call it the saw blade period, or even the period perhaps influenced by Goodrich Roberts. They're cerebral paintings, and as I say, I think they do have some merit, and they did receive some attention. And I got so sick of canvas, and I got sick of the sort of fashionable aspect of color field painting and minimal painting. And I don't lay down this as a rule for anyone else. It's just me. I stopped enjoying doing it, which is the most important thing. So I said, well, I think I'm just going to do something completely different, something that'll be a lot more fun, and something which will have some physicality to it. And I took a 8-foot by 4-foot piece of plywood, and I began to hand gouge it, and I thought that what I was going to do was make a large woodcut. But once I got gouging into the plywood with a hand gouge, I realized that this was the work. I wasn't going to be taking any prints off it. For about 2 years, I used various sized hand gouges, and then I discovered there was such a thing as a router. There was a machine that would make gouges of different sizes and different depths. As soon as I tried the router out, I realized that, that this was a marvelous tool for doing what almost amounts to a low relief on plywood. So that it was in 1971 that I switched over from the minimal abstract painting into imagery. The first works were fairly diagrammatical and had to do usually with phenomena such as lightning, and rain, and what happens to rain when it hits the water, goes into the water, comes back out again, shoots up as droplets and is picked up by the wind, blown back into the clouds again, things like that. And cumulus clouds, showing where the electricity is building up. Now comes the really exciting part. I get to put colors and lines and textures onto my routed surface. The large areas of blue sky will contain different tones of blue, ranging almost from pale blue to near purple. I think it's important to say here that each part of the painting is treated differently, so that one part may represent grass. I think represent is quite a good word here, because this is not a blow-up of a photograph, and it's not really a naturalistic technique, and it's not a new realism of some kind, but each section of the painting has its own texture, and that's what I'm after. Where I've routed with a small router, I'll be scrubbing paint in there, and in other places I'll apply the paint with a printer's roller. There's a certain amount of planning, and then when you attack the plywood, that planning is there, but of course it changes according to your feeling about the work. Now I've done most of the color. The color is not quite superimposed on the work as it would be on a canvas. The color has to be fitted into the various sizes of grooves and hatches, and it has to be integrated with the textures that we can see here. And now I'm going to go to work on the clouds. As with the rest of the painting, there is in my mind an approach. The clouds at the far right of the painting are going to have this stormy look that I mentioned, and then we're going to have these more isolated, brighter, whiter clouds at this end. But it's not just a case of sticking different tones of white paint on. It's really going to pull the work together or not. I've just indicated by the number of lines and the movement in the cloud that things are changing, and also, of course, by the change in the sky. It's darkened at that end. So that combination is sufficient to tell us that the weather is starting to act up. I've used some color, not just black strokes, but you can see some yellow, some orange, and some darkened yellow color. I have more or less echoed some of the forms that are in the fields and in the trees. Not too obviously and not to the same degree. I had thought of tones of gray within the clouds, but almost instinctively I left them out. This gives the cloud area more impact. Since there is less content in the cloud area than in the land, with its grasses and plowed fields and much routing, and then the small clumps of trees or copses. Since you have all that, relatively complicated, both in terms of drawing and color. Since you have relative simplicity here in the sky, one has to somehow balance it off. And if I had tried for the kind of detail that's in the landmass, it would have been impossible. So I did the reverse, and I gave a kind of éclat. It's a nice French word for, best word I can think of in English would be a feeling of surprise, almost on the verge of shocking, with its whiteness and its sparse, dark lines. It's what keeps the painting from verging on sentimentality. And I think it's, well, to my eyes and to my satisfaction, it plays, or they, if you wish, the clouds and the treatment of the clouds plays a very important part in that exciting surprise element of the painting. It has been exciting to work this large. My problem, and every painting poses its particular problem, was since I was doing more or less a straight-on landscape of the Lethbridge area, it could have come out banal, even sentimental. I think I surmounted the problem just by reminding myself that what I was doing was first a painting and a work of art, and that the subject matter was secondary. I feel very happy about the work. I think that I've achieved what I set out to do, and I think I've done it in my own style.